Hello, everybody. Welcome. Had one of those times where I had to reboot the computer again. It said it couldn't find the camera. Oh, well. Gosh, look at my hair. I just ran in the door. So we have our every other Monday, we have our St. Vincent de Paul meetings. And tonight I had to I represent St. Vincent de Paul at the city's ministerial alliance. So there's about 20 some odd churches that get together once a month, and we talk about how we as a group can solve some of the problems of the community. So I had to give my report this evening. It was kind of long. We had a very long meeting this month. And so I was running a little bit late, but I got here in time, and only to find out I couldn't find my camera. So I did get things restarted, and we are here and we're ready to go. Let me see who all's here already. I see all these great people who are already here. Stray Kitten, fantastic. Great to see you. Phaoxerus, good to see you too. Sue Me, welcome. And Diana too, welcome. Little Lone Prepper, welcome. Good evening. Let me see. Northern Girl Hobbies. And I'm quite certain we'll see Maggie and Triple G Farms and a couple others here quickly. Let me just kind of goof off here for a minute or two until till the message goes out and people get their verifications and can come back in. And so we'll waste a minute or two if you don't mind. I'm going to grab a drink of beer, A&W. I don't know if you've ever drank A&W beer. Something about a root or something. Gosh, that's always good and refreshing. Always good and refreshing. And there's no caffeine. So I can wake up in time tomorrow morning for my prayer meeting, and that'll be good. I will have to give you a confession. There we go. All this time, reading this chapter, all this time I was under the impression that the Supreme Court was 7 justices, and FDR packed the court in order to pass a lot of things he wanted passed, with 2 additional justices taking it from 7 to 10. And I found out that is not true. So I need to correct my perception and make sure I give you the correct information. So since 1787, the court had 6 justices. Then in 1789, they changed it to 7, with a Chief Justice. And then in 1801, it was reduced to 5. Then in 1802, it was restored to 6. And then in 1807 to 7. And then in 1837 to 9. It went up to 10 in 1863. However, in 1866 Act, right after the end of the Civil War, reduced it from 10 members to 7. And then the Judiciary Act of 1869 intervened, and it changed its members to 9 members, and it's been at 9 ever since. So the 9-member Supreme Court has been in effect since 1869. So President Roosevelt, I ask for your forgiveness for having probably more than once erroneously said that you packed the court to get some of your liberal policies passed. That is erroneous information. And since 1869, the Supreme Court has had 9 justices in it. So that's the truthful information. Hello, Utah Mike. Welcome. Good to see you. And Holly, good to see you as well. Gil, good evening. And it's always good to see you too, Gil. So let's talk about the Judiciary, which is Article 3 of the Constitution, Chapter 10 in this book that we're using, which is really kind of good. There are some things that have happened, like, for example, when Elena Kagan was appointed to the Supreme Court. Remember that she had been the advocate for Bill Clinton. She had served in the Obama White House as a staff attorney, and there was a lot of concern. She was also at either Harvard or Yale Law School. I forget. She was one of the deans there, and she once had the pro-Second Amendment, anti-Second Amendment people get into one room and duke it out, basically. Then she wrote a theory about it, and so she is very anti-Second Amendment, and they tried to do a lot of questioning to get her kicked off, but unfortunately, the Senate at that time was controlled under Harry Reid, and so she was approved, even though she is very, very anti-Second Amendment. So whether or not she will recuse herself or not is quite interesting, if that should ever come up. Some of the other key things that happened, Gonzalez versus Carhart, the Federal Partial Birth Abortion Ban Act was declared constitutional. Now, what had happened was Justice Roberts had replaced, had come on as the new Chief Justice, and Justice Alito had come on to replace Sandra Day O'Connor. Sandra Day O'Connor was actually very pro-abortion. Justice Alito was considered to be an extreme conservative, but he actually voted for partial birth abortion. So sometimes, when these people have these judicial things that they go for, they don't always come to fruition when they're on the Supreme Court. Justice Roberts is a great example. When George Bush appointed him, we thought he was going to be an extremely conservative justice, and you remember things like Obamacare passed only because Justice Roberts rewrote it to make it legal. So there are things that happen. So anyhow, the decision was a dramatic reversal of the Rehnquist Court's 2003 decision of Stenberg versus Carhart. In that case, the court declared unconstitutional an almost identical Nebraska partial birth abortion bill. The major difference between the two decisions, according to legal scholars, was the departure of Justice O'Connor, who had been a reliable advocate for abortion in narrowly tailored circumstances. So, and this is what gets me, okay? So if you have liberal-leaning justices and they vote for something that the liberals want, then it's due providence. But if you have conservative justices who vote against it, it's a packed court, and we have these terrible people on the court. I just wish we would accept the decisions of the 9, and get good people in there and then accept their decisions. And for example, the Dodd's decision that was just passed here recently was basically an overturning of Roe v. Wade. And it was, in my opinion, and I am not a Supreme Court scholar, and definitely not an attorney, but we take a look at, if we take a look at what is being done with the Second Amendment, okay, you'll hear people say, nowhere in the Second Amendment does it give you the right to own an AR-15, okay? Well, show me where in the Constitution it gives you a right to an abortion. So we have to take these things at face value. There are some things that we can read into it and say that there is, on behalf of the mother, a right to abortion. We can also say that on behalf of the infant, the unborn infant, that there is a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In the Second Amendment, we can say that there are some cases where we probably do want to restrict access to arms, and so we kind of have to take a look at our Supreme Court and say, hey, guys, be the wise people here and make these decisions for us and accept those decisions as they are. And, the decision that I believe was rightly made in the Dobbs decision was that it's not the federal government's authority to make that decision. Nowhere in the Constitution does it give the court or the federal government the authority to weigh a decision on that. So if it doesn't specifically grant the authority to Congress to do that, then that right is reserved to the states under the 10th Amendment, which is exactly what the Supreme Court said. Hey, it's not something that the federal government can decide. Therefore, it is reserved back to the states, and the states have to make their own decisions. And we just have to live with that. That if you don't like your state's law, you've got one of two choices. You can either become an advocate to have it changed and through the electoral process, or you can move to a state where it is more readily accepted. And, part of that is that's the intent of our federal system is if you don't like the state, if you don't like the laws of the state where you live, move to a state where you do like the laws. And that was, pretty much that's in the Federalist Papers. They kind of expressed that to us. In 2010, the court heard the case of Citizens United versus FEC. In this case, the court was, and that's the Federal Elections Commission. In this case, the court was asked to decide whether the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act's ban on certain campaign spending for businesses and unions passed constitutional muster. So there was a bipartisan ban passed by Congress that says unions are giving too much money to these people to keep you in power, and corporations, you're giving too much money to the opposite party to keep you in power and write laws that are beneficial to you. So we are going to, both of us, those who are pro-union are going to limit the amount that the unions can give, and those who are pro-corporation are going to vote to limit the amount that the corporations can give. So neither one can give over a certain amount. And that was a bill that was passed in 2003. Well, one of the businesses, Citizens United, it was actually a coalition of businesses, went to the Supreme Court and said, hey, this is infringing on our freedom of speech, because remember that the freedom of speech had just had a recent ruling in 1999 that said that certain actions and use of money is protected under free speech. So if I wear an armband, let's say, that says that I am of a particular party or political persuasion, or if I wear something else that kind of shows my freedom of speech, that I support a party, a person, or whatever, that's part of that free speech that's guaranteed in the First Amendment, okay? And remember, the First Amendment was written to protect your ability to speak politically without Congress writing laws that would restrict that ability to speak politically, okay? And so the Supreme Court came across with the decision and said, hey, wait a minute, you're right, okay? When we tell a corporation or a union, either one, you are limited. You can only donate this much money to your campaign or to that person's campaign. You are limiting their ability to have free speech in support of that candidate via their dollars, okay? So that's what the whole Citizens United thing was. This was the first time we had a president, Barack Obama, went up and right after the decision was made, went up on the podium for his State of the Union address and looked at the justices and said, you decided wrong. And that was a total breach of conduct that we'd never seen before in the annals of American history, as far as personally attacking, in a sense, the Supreme Court over a Supreme Court decision. Okay, so what kind of cases does the Supreme Court hear? And they have a list of several. All cases arising under the Constitution and laws or treaties of the United States, cases of admiralty or maritime jurisdiction, cases in which the United States is a party, controversies between a state and citizens of one state and another state, controversies between two or more states, controversies between citizens of different states, controversies between citizens of the same state claiming lands under grants in different states, controversies between a state or the citizens thereof and foreign states or citizens thereof, and all cases affecting ambassadors or other public ministers. So, for example, if, we can take the three biggies, okay? Escobedo versus Illinois, Miranda versus Arizona, and Knapp versus Ohio. So the Miranda rights, you remember that one, I'm sure, protection under the Fifth Amendment. So all three of those, they could not petition based on their conviction. What they petitioned to the Supreme Court was that their rights under the Fourth, Fifth, or Sixth Amendment, or 14th Amendment, had been violated by the state in the conduct of the investigation and prosecution of their case. So it wasn't a question of their guilt or innocence. It was a question on methodology. that their rights had been violated. So that's what, those three cases, Escobedo, Miranda, and Mapp, are the three that really set our modern jurisprudence system and police investigatory powers. That was in the mid to late 60s that all three of those cases came about, and reinforce, the Miranda rights that the police officer has to offer you, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one of those cases where it was the citizen saying that the basically the trial had violated their rights that are guaranteed to them under the Constitution of the United States. So that was the basis for all three of those. Let me see, am I missing any great Random JL, welcome, good to see you. Butch Graves, good to see you as well, my friend. I think I caught Northern Girl Hobbies. I know I caught Holly. Okay, so caught up with the chat. So basically that's it. So now then, remember in the Constitution it says that the Senate shall appoint inferior courts as necessary for the court system. So we've got the Supreme Court. Where's my Constitution? Doggone it. I was going to read that to you. There it is, I think. Nope, that's church. I don't know what I did with my Constitution. Anyhow, oh, there it is. See, Article 2. Is to constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court. So basically to constitute a system of justices underneath the Supreme Court, so that you can have those challenges made at a level lower than the Supreme Court. So that is basically the Judiciary Act of 1789. So the Judiciary Act of 1789 basically established all the federal courts and district courts and all those other court systems and the appointments and who all was going to do what and everything else. So everything in our judicial system is based off of that bill in 1789 that the Constitution granted the authority to the Senate to appoint inferior courts to the Supreme Court. Okay. So let's take a look at what we've got in 1789. 1787, we have the Constitution. 1789 Judiciary Act gives form and substance to the federal judiciary, establishing the three-tiered system that still exists today. In 1790, the first Supreme Court session was held, and it met for the first time in New York City. In 1801, John Marshall became the Chief Justice, and the Marshall Court increases the power of the court, discontinues the practice of seriatim opinions, and expands the power of the court over the states. And that's going to be further sanctified, basically, in 1803 by the Marbury v. Madison decision. So the Marbury v. Madison decision of 1803, the court asserts that the power of judicial review can be implied from the Constitution's supremacy clause. So the law of the land and the interpretation of that law by the Supreme Court is the supreme interpretation. So in Marbury v. Madison, it basically said that the Supreme Court, exercising its legitimate powers over Congress and over the president, could declare a bill or a law to be unconstitutional and therefore null and void. Okay, which is basically the power that they have used against President Biden. I remember that President Biden wanted to relieve people who had student loans. He wanted to give them student loan forgiveness. The Supreme Court says, no, you can't do that. That is the power that is reserved to Congress. They have to write a bill. President Biden says, well, then I'll go around both Congress and you. And so now we're at the point to where the president's doing what he wants to do, and there's nowhere in there a proviso for how does the Supreme Court enforce a Supreme Court decision? How does a Senate who has that authority, basically, to do the enforcement, who is very friendly to the person and wants what he's doing, even though it's illegal, done, how do they then exercise authority over them? How do we have that containment? How do we have that control? How does that get exercised? And that's a question that's still unresolved today. So there are some pundits out there that say that we are in a constitutional crisis. So when the Supreme Court says you can't do that, and the president does it anyway, how do they have their decision or their recommendation on legality? How do they enforce that? Yes, that's right, Sumi. He is doing it. Well, basically, he's just doing it. He's sidestepping them for the first time. First time he did it on his own through an executive order. Supreme Court said you can't do that. Now he's trying to sidestep that and come around it with a different angle, saying this is how I can bypass Congress and the Supreme Court. So yes, so and that's a great solution, Diana, too. Absolutely. So the power of the purse. Remember, where there are three things that the Congress has, and one of them is the power of the purse. So if they don't fund something, then that gets it. What are they not going to fund? He's asking not to fund loan forgiveness, or not to get the loan back from them. So I guess the point would be that if the students aren't going to pay it back, the citizens' taxes have to pay it back, and therefore don't fund that. And I see what you're saying. I think that's what you're saying. But that's a very astute observation. Thank you for bringing that up. In 1882, Justice Horace Gray was the first one to hire a clerk. And so clerks greatly facilitate the work of the justices. Today, each justice has 4 clerks. Now, remember the National Labor Relations Act, the Fair Labor Standards Act says that they don't even have to pay them anything. Not only have to pay them minimum wage. In 1935, the Supreme Court building was opened. So that's the first time they held any cases inside the Supreme Court building. In 1953, Earl Warren became the Chief Justice. Earl Warren was very much responsible for the expansion of civil rights and for the expansion of liberties. And I tell you, we owe that guy an awful lot for a lot of his decisions. Although there are those who think that he botched it with his Warren Commission report into the investigation of the assassination of JFK. So he did more good than bad. So even if it was a bad decision under JFK, the assassination report, I still think he did a lot of good stuff that was integrating the U.S. and giving more equal rights to everybody across the board. So I really love the guy for that. In 2005, John G. Roberts became the Chief Justice, replacing Earl Warren, and the current court is viewed as leaning conservative. And actually, I would say that it's probably 5 conservatives, 3 liberals, and 1 who kind of goes back and forth. And we've seen Justice Alito, even go to the liberal side in 1 or 2 instances. So I'm not going to say it is as definitively conservative as a lot of people would claim it to be. Of course, Justice Roberts is kind of, I'm going to say, since he has become the Supreme Court Chief Justice, he has been center left. And we anticipated him being pretty much right, but he has been pretty much center left. Justice Alito is pretty much centrist, and he is a deciding vote. Let's say it that way. He's probably the swing vote. So we have jurisdictions. So we talk about original jurisdiction, appellate jurisdiction. Who has jurisdiction over the course? Do you have cause to bring a course? And so you'll hear that quite often somebody will appeal to the Supreme Court for a decision over something, and they'll say you don't have jurisdiction, or they'll say you don't have cause. Okay, what that means is, remember that list of reasons why you can go to the Supreme Court? Well, if it doesn't fit into one of those decisions, then the Supreme Court's not going to hear it. It's going to refer it back to either a state Supreme Court or to an appellate court. Um, so the courts are trial court, the court of original jurisdiction where the cases begin, appellate court, a court that generally reviews only the findings of law made by a lower court, jurisdiction, authority vested in a particular court to hear and decide the issues in that particular case, original jurisdiction, the jurisdiction of courts that hear a case first, usually in a trial. These courts determine the facts of the case, and then appellate jurisdiction is the power vested in appellate courts to review and or revise the decision of a lower court. So if we take a look, we've got the state court, we've got two court systems, okay? You've got the state court for violations of the state's laws and constitution. Then you've got the federal court system, which is basically violation of the federal court laws and jurisdictions. So at the state, you have the state trial court. There's over 100 million filings per year in the state trial courts as of 2001 when this book was written. Then you have the state intermediate appellate court. It handles about 300,000 cases per year. And then you have the Supreme Court in the states, and there are 52 Supreme Courts, but there's not 52 states. So the other two are, of course, Puerto Rico, and then the other one is American Samoa. And DC falls into the Supreme Court. Okay, so the federal court system, down at the very bottom, you have U.S. district courts. 94 courts have handled 350,000 cases in 2001. The federal government has to be a party. Civil suits that fall under federal law, civil suits between citizens of different states that have a damage of greater than $75,000, admiralty or maritime disputes, bankruptcy disputes, and other matters assigned to them by Congress. They don't have any appellate jurisdiction. So the Court of Appeals has no original jurisdiction, but they do have appellate jurisdiction. So they can hear appeals of cases from lower courts, U.S. regulatory commissions. So let's say that the ATF has a judicial hearing, not a court, but a judicial hearing, finds you guilty of something and says you're going to have to do this. If you want to appeal that, you're going to have to appeal that to a U.S. Court of Appeal, okay? And then of legislative courts, including the U.S. Court of Federal Claims and U.S. Court of Veterans Appeals. And then finally, the court above that is the U.S. Supreme Court, and they have appellate jurisdiction over the appeals courts. So quite often what you'll hear is the Supreme Court says, we're not going to accept this case, and we're not going to hear it. We're going to remand it back to the appellate court. So what that means is when they say we're going to remand it back, okay, what that means is we don't agree with your decision. We want you to come back with a different decision, but they're going to leave it in the lap of that appellate court. The other thing they can do is they can just refuse to hear it. Now, if they refuse to hear it, what that is that's supporting the appellate court's decision. Okay. Kind of a hip pocket veto like the president has, if you will. Okay. Let me check here. It looks like we got some good comments in here. Oh, Maggie showed up. Hi, Aussie. Hi, Maggie. Hi, Triple G Farms. Welcome to you as well. Great people. I saw a video today, Theoxorus, where they were talking about an action a homeowner took against a squatter who basically entered in through a basement window and took over his basement. And so he just basically he drilled boards and barred up the basement. So there's no way you can get anywhere in and out of the basement except through that one window. And so, we'll see what happens there. That's going to be kind of interesting. Let me see what else. So the question is, yes, if it is a violation, as I said, with Escobedo, Miranda, and MAP versus Ohio, Escobedo versus Illinois, and Miranda versus Arizona, if they feel that their constitutional rights have been suppressed. And, then let's take a case that started today. Okay. So we have a case that started today in New York City. And basically what it says, well, we don't know what it says. What they're saying is that illegal slush fund money or illegal payment of quiet money. But that's not a law, and it's a misdemeanor. But they're raising it to where they're going to have 74 counts of felonious, 74 felonious counts. And so if you take a look at all the attorneys who have reviewed the case, they say, what law was broken, okay, and what are we prosecuting? The defense doesn't know what they have to defend against. They don't know the claim. What is the law that is being broken? It's assumed that what the prosecutor is going to try to do is say that President Trump used campaign funds to pay off Stormy Daniels in a hush fund. Because paying off somebody hush funds, don't say anything, I'll give you money, in and of itself is not illegal. Where they're trying to make a case where it is illegal is they're trying to say that he didn't keep accurate records, and it could have been his campaign funds that made that payment. And if it is, then that is a violation of the Federal Election Commission laws, and that's a felony. And so they're trying to break that up into 74 payments or something. I don't know. But anyhow, there is no real crime. The defense doesn't know what to defend against. So if there is a conviction, plus you have to remember, President Trump asked for a change of venue. That is, he does not believe he's going to get a fair trial, a trial by a jury of his peers in that courtroom, because they voted 92% against him and for his opponent in the last election that he was in. So that shows that they are vehemently opposed to him. And so his question is, can I get a fair trial in this court? And the judge came back and said, yes, you can get a fair trial in this court. And so now he's stuck in that. So if he gets convicted, okay, there are several different things that he can take directly to the Supreme Court, and it probably, or he may go to the appellate court. I don't know, but anyhow, there were a whole bunch of constitutional rights that are being violated, and so he can appeal that conviction based on the not knowing what crime is actually being prosecuted. The refusal for a change of venue, for the refusal for him to get a fair and honest trial of his peers. There's a lot of different things. So in that case, I can see that case going from state court, where it currently is. And remember, the state court is also trying him on federal election charges. And so that is very seldom done. Usually, if you break a federal law, you're tried in federal court. If you break a state law, you're tried in state court. If you break a traffic violation in city court, you go to municipal court. So there's a whole bunch of shenanigans going on here that's probably going to, under appeal, will get overturned. So that's just the way it goes. Okay, let me see here. Doctor says, I think federal cases can be moved up by the feds. They basically assert supremacy. That's the supremacy clause, yes. And that was reasserted under Marbury v. Madison. Yeah, there is cats and prepping. So and as I said, let me go back and review those. So this is, if you want to go from the highest court in the state over to the Supreme Court rarely exercises its original jurisdiction. Only 1% to 3% of cases heard are original jurisdiction. That means that it hasn't been through any other court system at all. Cases are heard by the Supreme Court first when they involve 2 or more states, the United States and a state, foreign ambassadors and other diplomats, or a state and a citizen of another state if the action is begun by a state. Most cases heard by the Supreme Court are under the appellate jurisdiction, which is 97 to 99% of the cases heard. The Supreme Court can agree to hear cases involving appeals from either the U.S. Courts of Appeals or appeals from the highest state court that involves a federal question, or from a court of military appeals. So basically what this is saying is that once President Trump, I'm going to make it concrete only as an example, not as a statement of support or admonition or anything else. So if President Trump is convicted of these crimes, especially since they are alleging that the state court is going to exercise authority over a federal law, then he can take that directly to a federal appellate court. Then the federal appellate court directly to the Supreme Court. If, on the other hand, it's the state charges, then he's going to have to go up through the state appellate court and then the state Supreme Court, and then from the state Supreme Court over to the federal Supreme Court if he feels that it's a violation of his federal constitutional rights. So it gets convoluted. I am so sorry for that, but that's pretty much how it goes. Okay, so there are 11 courts of appeals. So the first is the Northeastern. It's Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. The second is Vermont, New York, and Connecticut. The third is Pennsylvania and New Jersey, and a portion of New York. The fourth is West Virginia, Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, North Carolina, South Carolina. The fifth is Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas. The sixth is Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee. The seventh is Wisconsin, Indiana, and Illinois. The eighth is North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa, Missouri, and Arkansas. The ninth is Alaska, Hawaii, Arizona, California, Nevada, Oregon, Idaho, Washington, and Montana. The 10th is Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico. And the 11th is Georgia, Alabama, and Florida. Now, Puerto Rico is included in the first court, and the Virgin Islands are included in the third. Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands are included in the ninth. So that kind of gives you the idea of the breakup of the appellate courts. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And that's one of those things that should be left up to the states. Okay. It talks about appointments to the Supreme Court. So the President Obama appointed 866 judges, G.W. Bush 866, Clinton 841, Bush 825, Reagan 740, and Carter 657. And then it also gives breakdowns as to experience, political affiliation. So Carter, 91% of them were Democrats. Reagan, 92% were Republican. Bush, 89% were Republican. Clinton, 88% were Democrats. And G.W. Bush, 83% were Republicans. Average age is right around 48 years old when they get appointed to the Supreme Court. Let me see. You know, here in Texas, we elect our Supreme Court justices. So, and I think it's a 6-year term. So, as a matter of fact, one of our current senators was a Supreme Court justice before he became a senator. And so all of our Supreme Court justices, most of our judges, as a matter of fact, are elected here in Texas. And the question that's raised in the book is, should the Supreme Court justices be elected? And the other question, of course, is, should the Supreme Court justices have tenure? limits on their tenure. Right now, it's all judgeships. Basically, once you are nominated and consented to by the Senate, it is a lifetime appointment. So, is there a time when somebody can become too senile to serve? Oh, okay. That could very well be true. Thank you for sharing that, Theoxorus. Yeah, supposedly Justice is blind, right? That she has, the torch of light, enlightenment in one hand, the law in the other, and she's blind. Oh, no, I'm sorry. She has a scale of justice in one hand and the law book in the other, and is blindfolded as to the character of the person, and is only supposed to be interpreting the law and weighing the law. So that is, and the other one is, and it does not appear anywhere in the Constitution. Nowhere in the Constitution will you see where it says a man is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. That is a presumption that we have. It's not elicited verbatim anywhere in the Constitution. Okay, but when you take a look at, it's an explanation, a very good explanation of how our judicial system is set up, and one of those is that it has to be a unanimous decision, and that's part of that Republican form of government. Is that in a democratic form of government, you only have to have a simple majority to convict somebody. In a Republican form of government, you have to have a unanimous agreement on the guilt of the individual before you can convict them. That's one of the major differences between democracy versus republic. I'm think we answered that. I hope. I'm unfamiliar with that one, Cats and Prepping. So if you could enlighten me on that, I would greatly appreciate it. Is that the one about the election fraud? Well, the thing is, we have to follow the Constitution. So remember that you've got Article 1, Section 8 tells Congress what they can make laws about. And then we have one other, we have the 16th Amendment that basically authorizes Congress to also establish the income tax. So other than those things, right, then everything else, if it's not listed in Article 1, Section 8 or 16th Amendment, then Congress can't do it, theoretically. But they do all kinds of things that they aren't supposed to be doing. They do it under a general clause, what they call the general clause under Article 1. And let me see. I'm not finding it. But anyhow, it basically says for the good of the people. Okay. So a lot of times you'll see a lot of laws passed under that generic term of for the good of the people. I didn't see it. Inform us. Yes, this was the Senate. So the Senate has authority to define the districts. And I believe this was the 1903 Act that basically defined the districts. Who are we? I missed something, but it looks like y'all are having good fun with that one. I don't know who we're talking about, but so Maggie, and we've got there's a lot of opinion out there that Ken Paxton, our Attorney General here in the state of Texas, is he just survived an impeachment hearing and charges of corruption and things like that. So, yeah, we all have those problems. I think, personal opinion. Okay, so bear with me, people. This is really just a personal opinion. I think we need term limits on almost every position there is, because what we find is that people graft and greed come into the process, and then they no longer worry about the constituents. I know that people say, yeah, but you can vote them out. The power that an incumbent has for reelection is just unbelievable. My representative here, Judge Carter. We call him Judge Carter, but he was a local judge, district appeals court for the state, municipal and then district, but he's been in Congress so long that he's got almost a senior position on the Armed Services Committee, and so do you want to replace him and get somebody else in who doesn't have that kind of influence? And we've got, inside his area that he represents, we've got Fort Hood. So he is the bastion of trying to take care of Fort Hood and the outlying areas around Fort Hood, and the citizens of those areas, trying to take good care of them. So you lose that. If you lose his position on the House Armed Services Committee, you lose that influence to take care of Killeen, Coppers Cove, Harker Heights, that whole area there, even as far east possibly as Belton Temple, and as far west as Lampasas. So Kempner and Lampasas. So you lose a lot of influence if that happens. And I don't know. Wiser people than I come up with these things, I guess. But I am all for term limits. Okay. And that's part of the problem, cats and prepping. And you're absolutely right. They fall under the same election laws as everybody else, but gosh, just think if somebody said, if you vote me, I'll do these decisions this way. Golly. But we have politicians saying that if you elect me, I'll write this law this way. But I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I wish I was smarter than I am. I saw a video of Josh Harley grilling Mayorkas over an app that they made for immigrants to schedule an appointment to enter the U.S. and they don't have to wait at the border. No questions asked. Wow. Although I really like Josh Hawley. He is good. It's an assumption. It's not a written law. Yeah. Well, actually, the opposite, Maggie. A Democrat government leaves it up to the people. So, in a Democrat, and my favorite example is that you've got a posse of 11 guys, and they go out and they believe this guy is suspect of horse thievery. So they take a vote and they say, we're going to convict you of horse stealing, horse rustling, cattle rustling, whatever, and we're going to hang you. Okay. So then as long as 6 of the 11 vote to hang him, he's hanged. Okay. In a Republican form of government, you're bound by law. In our case, the law is the Constitution, and subordinate law is passed as a result of that. So one of the laws that we have here is, regardless of what the people say, unless there is 100% unanimous support for the conviction, there is no conviction. So Republicanism is a form of democracy guided by written laws, okay, to ensure the rights of the individual. Whereas under the Greek form of democracy, as long as 51%. So that means, that my favorite example of that is you've got 2 wolves and a sheep, and they say, let's take a vote on who's going to be dinner, right? And so, the two, as long as the two wolves say we're going to eat sheep, the sheep, poor person out. Whereas in a Republican form of government, they can say, but you can't eat each other, right? So they say, wait a minute, we got a law. We can't eat each other. So that's an invalid vote. We can't do that. If you want to know bills brought in on specific topics, you can set up a login and notification via text or email on specific tag or search parameters such as gun laws, abortion laws, etc. Yes, and that applies to the Federal Register as well. I think he means well. I am at the point now where I'm skeptical of anything and everything. And when people start accusing people of other things, I'm very skeptical until I see some concrete proof. I am of the opinion that everything that has been done criminally, legally, and everything else against President Trump is purely political, to include both impeachments. I don't believe that there was any crime committed. I don't think there was anything to be impeached about. I think it's purely political. And so it doesn't matter who you are nowadays. I'm skeptical if you're charged with anything. Now, when there is definite proof, and you see that the Department of Justice is working to protect certain groups and working to indict other groups, then that gets kind of weary in my point. I think the primary example here was I saw a video, and this was back during the Obama administration, where Vice President Joe Biden bragged about the fact that the corruption was in Ukraine like you would not believe. They got this new super prosecutor in. He was going to go out and investigate corruption and get rid of corruption. And he was kind of appointed at the request of the U.S. Congress. And so he started investigating. Well, one of the companies he was investigating was Burisma, and Burisma had Hunter Biden on its board. So President Joe Biden said, no, you aren't going to, you're going to resign. And so he told the president of Ukraine, look, either you fire that prosecutor or you don't get the money. And now this is his rendition of the story that he confessed on national news, okay? And he says, and so the president of Ukraine said, you don't have the authority to do that. And Vice President Biden said, call Obama and ask if I have that authority or not. And he says, by the time he got to the plane, he got message from the president of Ukraine that investigator who was investigating his son's business had been fired and they would not be investigated. So, I mean, when you've got a hard case where somebody's confessed on national TV, then yeah, I say go for it. I think that's slightly different. I am skeptical of a lot of charges. And a matter of fact, I was kicked off of the jury pool because I asked some questions that were, I wasn't satisfied with the proof. And so, and it was a driving while intoxicated case. And I don't care for driving while intoxicated at all. But, in all reality, how many times should I have been thrown in jail? And by the grace of God was not caught and didn't have an accident, didn't hurt anybody. And so, I'm kind of tough on, let's see what the law says, okay? And let's follow the law to the letter. If you don't like the law, change the law. But however the law is written, and let's enforce it the way it is currently written until such time as it's changed. I mean, are you going to give me a ticket for doing 80 in a 55 when I can show you that I can show you signs here on I-35 that say that speed limit's 80, or not I-35, but Texas 130. I'll show you signs on the tollway says speed limit one is 80, right? So when does that law apply? When does speed limit 80 apply and when does it not apply? Does it apply when it's posted? Does it apply when it's not posted? follow the rules, the laws as they are written, as they are made known. And, if you don't like them, change them. I believe it was another case of political prosecution from what I have seen. Now, there are some things I would say are cause for concern. Don't know the extent of that, but he's not pure chaste white. But at the same time, I think they put a lot more black into that on the black-white scale than there was. There's probably a lot of gray. But anyhow, gosh, that was an interesting trial. I like that term, lawfare. I like that. That's a great, Diana, too. You ought to copyright that. That's fantastic. Yes, I believe you're right, Fiexus. I believe that as long as we don't follow the law, then it's over. Actually, it's kind of boring. I think it's all political. Okay, so the only other thing left here is basically hearing and deciding the case. Do you all want me to continue on with hearing and deciding the case next week, or do you want to go ahead and jump into public opinion and political socialization? I think, why don't we just go into public opinion and political socialization? So that's what we'll pick up next week when we come back. So great discussion, everybody. Thank you so much. I will be here tomorrow night at 8:00. I'm having a tough time. And if anybody has read either of these two books, for follow-up to our Tuesday night book, I'm not going to do bunker because it's very particular to building a bunker. And I don't think everybody can do that. I'm thinking about this one. I like How to Survive the End of the World. You can tell I like it because of my notes. I bought this in 2013. Look at that. August 18th, 2013. But anyhow, what I do like about this book is it gives all kinds of great lists. And so if you're looking for things to check up on, to include in your plan, to make sure that you have a lot of good information on, this is a phenomenal book by James Wesley Rawls. He was an MI officer, by the way, but great book with a lot of great lists. So you can check it off and say, what do I need to do next? This is a phenomenal book as well. I don't have it as well tabbed, have highlighted, but not tabbed. Prepare yourself for a home set and grid down situation. Now, it's not just grid down. Let me go through some of the chapters for you. It's what it means to you, immediate short-term solutions, going off grid, how to heat and cool, lighting, water filtration and storage, food and cooking, medical care, sanitation and hygiene, laundry and dishwashing, communication, security, and then economic collapse. So this is bunched more into groupings with some ideas in it, whereas this one has great lists. I'm leaning towards this one right now. So let me see. Do me a favor. Think about it. Let me know tomorrow night. You can get online, look up the Riley grid down situation, look up Rawls's How to Survive the End of the World as You Know It, and investigate those two on Amazon. And then tomorrow night, let's see which one we want to use as a follow-on to this fantastic book that we're doing right now, which is the Food Storage book by David Nash. Okay, let me see. Our country has been in trouble for the last 50 years. The people who trusted the government too much. It's sad, but it will take a long time for America to come back. I love what America stood for. You and I are in 100% parallel thoughts, Pat. I wholeheartedly agree with you. Fiaxis is saying he likes the Rawls book. Good idea, Maggie. So you can go to Kindle and download those two books. I'll put the names of the books down in the show notes after we shut off, and I'll probably put in links for them as well, so in case you want to do both of those. Hello, Ting Ting. Welcome. Okay. Book of Numbers, chapter 6, verses 24, 25, 26. Oh, and I just found another great one I like. I really, really like. I'll have to share that with you in the future. So this is how you shall bless the Israelites, saying to them, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord let his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord look upon you kindly and give you peace. So please do me a favor. Y'all are so great. I mean, I am blessed, and I say thank you, prayers, that we have such a great group of people with such great ideas, such good sharing. You're very polite. Even when you correct me, you're so polite, kind, and respectful. That's what we need to do. We need to be building relationships so that we can get through this together, because the only way we're going to get through this is by getting it through it together. Nobody's going to be a lone wolf, and you aren't going to attract anybody with vinegar. You've got to attract people with knowledge, honey, and skills that you have to offer. So remember, we're all in this together so we can come out the other side together. And thank you for being kind, polite, and respectful to each other, because that's what really makes it matter. And we're going to get through this. We're going to come through this together. Take care, everybody. Have a great evening. See you tomorrow night at 8 o'clock Central Time. Bye-bye.